The sky above the human colony had always been a calm, familiar sight. The stars twinkled in the distance, and the moon cast a soft glow over the world below. But tonight, the calm was shattered. The air was thick with tension, and every human on the planet could feel it. A storm was coming, one that no one was prepared for. For the last few days, the planet had been on high alert. Strange signals had been detected from deep space, unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. Military units across the colony were scrambling to make sense of the data. Satellite feeds picked up unusual activity near the edges of the solar system, and experts were at a loss. No one knew exactly what was happening, but they all felt it. Something dangerous was on its way. Captain Elias stood in the command center, his eyes glued to the holographic display in front of him. His fingers hovered over the buttons, but he hesitated. The data from the sensors was clear. Enormous ships were approaching. But the real question was, who was approaching? "Sir, the fleet is moving fast. They'll be here in less than 2 hours," said Lieutenant Harper, a young officer with nerves of steel, but a face that betrayed her worry. Elias nodded. The briefing had already given him the basics. A fleet of unknown ships, with technology far beyond anything humans had ever seen, were heading toward the colony. There had been no communication from the fleet, and the silence was what made everyone nervous. It was as if they were preparing for something worse than a war. "Have we gotten any response from the Drachmorians?" Elias asked, his voice calm but firm. He'd heard the rumors. The Drachmorians were known to be ruthless, a race of technologically advanced aliens that had left destruction in their wake throughout the galaxy. They didn't negotiate, they conquered. "No, sir." "Nothing yet," Harper responded, her eyes scanning the various screens. Elias couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just another alien invasion. The Drachmorians were ruthless, but they were also smart. They didn't attack unless they had a reason, and the humans had no idea what that reason was. A buzzing sound filled the room, and Elias looked up at the main monitor. A message was coming through from the outer reaches of the solar system. His heart skipped a beat as the screen flickered to life. The message was brief, and it made his blood run cold. "We demand the beast. If you do not comply, your colony will be destroyed." The voice was deep, mechanical with an unnatural, almost robotic quality to it. The words themselves sent a chill down Elias's spine. The beast. What did that mean? What could possibly be so important to these aliens that they would threaten an entire colony over it? "Do you think it's a bluff?" Lieutenant Harper asked, her voice shaky. "I don't know," Elias replied, his mind racing. "But we can't take any chances." The Drachmorian message had come through loud and clear, and now the clock was ticking. The countdown had officially begun. Less than 2 hours until they arrived. Less than 2 hours to figure out what the beast was and why it was so important. Elias moved quickly, barking orders to his team. They needed to gather every scrap of information they could. It wasn't just about survival anymore. The fate of the entire colony was on the line. The pressure was unbearable, but Elias knew there was no room for mistakes. He needed to stay calm. The rest of the crew was counting on him. He turned to the central communications panel, bringing up data from all over the planet. In the distance, he could see the faint flicker of ships entering the system. Huge, dark shapes against the black void of space. The Drachmorian fleet. At least 20 ships, each one larger and more menacing than anything humanity had ever built. Elias took a deep breath and ordered the military to prepare for an emergency defense. The whole colony had been trained for situations like this. The defenses weren't perfect, but they would hold. They had to. Still, the question remained, what was the beast? As he paced in the command center, Elias's thoughts kept circling back to that one word. The beast. Was it a weapon? A machine? A living creature? There was no way of knowing. But whatever it was, the Drachmorians clearly wanted it badly enough to wipe out an entire colony to get their hands on it. The general consensus among the officers was that they needed to find out more about the beast and figure out what made it so important. Maybe they could use it as leverage in negotiations, but that was a dangerous gamble. Negotiating with the Drachmorians was nearly impossible. They didn't play by the rules. Elias couldn't afford to waste any more time. He had to make a decision. If the Drachmorians came to claim the beast, they'd have to be ready to fight, even if they didn't fully understand the threat. They couldn't let their guard down. The clock ticked down with relentless precision. Every second that passed made the danger feel more real. The reality of what was happening sank in deeper. Elias had always known there was a risk of alien encounters, but this was different. The Drachmorians weren't here just to conquer. They were here for something more. Elias activated a secure line to the higher-ups, briefing them on the situation. We need full mobilization. If they try to take the beast, we can't just hand it over. Whatever this beast is, we have to be ready for anything. His commanding officer's voice crackled through the comms. Understood, Captain. Get your team to the beast's location. We'll handle the rest. Elias nodded, then turned to his team. They were ready. They had to be. As he walked toward the hangar bay, the atmosphere around him felt tense, suffocating. The sound of boots clanging against the metal floors echoed throughout the corridors. Soldiers, engineers, and pilots were all getting into position, preparing for the inevitable. The humans would not go down without a fight. They would not let these aliens take what they had built, no matter what it was. Outside the colony, the Drachmorian fleet was almost within striking range. Elias could feel the weight of the world on his shoulders. Whatever came next, they were in it together. The beast, whatever it was the key to survival, and Elias knew that the fate of everyone on the colony rested on finding it before the Drachmorians did. As the fleet closed in, he couldn't help but wonder, would they survive this? Time was running out. The cold steel walls of the facility echoed with the footsteps of Elias and his team as they made their way toward the depths of the underground base. The command had been clear: locate the beast, make sure it's ready, and be prepared for anything. But the more Elias thought about it, the more the question gnawed at him. What was the beast? He glanced over at his team. The same worry mirrored in their faces. Harper, the young lieutenant, was walking closely behind him, her hand firmly gripping her rifle. She didn't say much, but Elias could tell she was just as unsure as he was about what they were about to find. The whole mission felt like stepping into the unknown, and with the Drachmorian fleet closing in, there was no time to waste. The elevator doors slid open, and they emerged into the central chamber, the heart of the facility. There before them stood a massive door, its surface covered in ancient symbols and inscriptions that no one could decipher. This was where the beast was kept. The door had not been opened in decades, and no one in the colony had ever seen what lay beyond it. Elias's hand hovered over the control panel, his heart racing. The security system was still in place, but after a few moments of scanning, the door clicked open with a heavy metallic groan. The room inside was dimly lit, casting long shadows across the floor. A faint hum could be heard from somewhere in the back, as if the very air was alive with energy. "Are we sure about this, sir?" Harper's voice broke through the silence, her tone more cautious than usual. Elias nodded, though he wasn't as sure as he'd like to be. "We don't have a choice. The Drachmorians are already on their way. If we don't figure this out, they'll destroy the colony." Harper swallowed hard, but didn't question him further. Together, they stepped into the room, the air growing colder with each step they took. The space was enormous, the size of a small hangar, and the walls were lined with strange, glowing panels. In the center of the room, on a raised platform, sat the beast. At first glance, it didn't look like much, just a large, imposing structure covered in dust and rust. But as Elias and his team approached, the true scale of it became clear. The beast was not some mindless weapon, as they had been led to believe. It was something far more complex. The structure was humanoid in shape, with broad shoulders, a narrow waist, and limbs that looked both powerful and elegant. Its metal surface glinted faintly under the dim lights, but what caught Elias's attention were the eyes. At the top of the structure, two glowing orbs flickered to life as if sensing their presence. For a moment, Elias froze, unsure of what he was seeing. These were not just sensors or machines. They were eyes, intelligent eyes. "Is it alive?" Harper whispered, as though afraid to disturb whatever this thing was. Elias didn't have an answer. His mind raced as he tried to process the sight before him. The beast was more than just a weapon. It was a creation, a being of immense power and purpose. But what kind of purpose? Was it meant to protect humanity, or was it something far more dangerous? Without another word, Elias stepped forward, moving closer to the platform. He knew that if they were going to stand a chance against the Dracmorians, they needed to understand this thing. He reached out and placed his hand on the surface of the beast's metallic arm, half expecting it to be cold and lifeless. Instead, there was a warmth to it, a pulse, as if it was alive. The moment his hand made contact, the beast's body shuddered. The glowing eyes flickered brighter, and for the first time since its discovery, it began to move. A low hum filled the air, and the sound of metal grinding against metal echoed through the room. Elias took a step back, his instincts telling him to be cautious, but it was already too late. The beast was awakening. Harper gasped, her hand instinctively reaching for her weapon. "What the hell is happening?" "I don't know," Elias muttered, his eyes fixed on the beast as it slowly lifted its head. The process was slow at first, almost as if it was waking from a deep sleep. Then, with a sudden motion, the beast's eyes snapped open, glowing bright white. A voice, low and mechanical, filled the room. "Who dares to awaken me?" Elias's heart skipped a beat. The voice wasn't human. It wasn't even entirely mechanical. It was something in between, like a blend of artificial intelligence and something more organic. He swallowed, trying to steady his breath. I am Captain Elias of the Terran Defense Force. We need your help. The Dracmorians are coming for us. They want you." For a long moment, the beast remained still, its glowing eyes locked onto Elias. The silence stretched on, thick and heavy. Finally, the beast spoke again, its voice carrying an unexpected weight. "I am the beast, but I am not your weapon. I am your protector." Elias blinked, confused. "Protector? What do you mean?" The beast's eyes flickered, and for a moment, it seemed to scan Elias and his team, as if searching for something. Then it spoke again, its tone softer, more contemplative. "I was created to defend against an ancient enemy, but I was sealed away, forgotten. Now you awaken me in a time of war, and I will fulfill my purpose." Elias's mind raced as he tried to understand. This wasn't just a weapon. This was a creation with a purpose that had been dormant for centuries. But why had it been hidden away? Why was it sealed off, left to rust in this forgotten facility? Before he could ask more questions, the room suddenly shook with a violent tremor. The sound of distant explosions rattled the walls, and the overhead lights flickered. The Dracmorian fleet was approaching. The time for answers was running out. Elias turned to his team. "We need to get this thing online now. We don't have much time." Harper nodded quickly, already pulling up the activation protocols on a nearby terminal. "I'm on it, sir." The beast remained motionless, but its glowing eyes continued to watch them intently. "I will protect you, Captain. But know this, my power is not limitless. If you ask too much of me, I may not survive." Elias nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. They needed to use the beast to fight the Dracmorians, but they couldn't waste its strength. They had to be strategic. As Harper worked to bring the beast fully online, Elias felt a surge of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could survive this. The beast might not be what they expected, but it was exactly what they needed. As the beast's systems hummed to life, Elias felt the first spark of confidence. This wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. It was a fight for humanity's future. And with the beast on their side, they had a fighting chance. Elias stood at the edge of the command platform, staring out through the reinforced viewport as the Drakmorian fleet came into view. Massive black ships, each one bristling with weapons and shield generators, hovered just beyond the planet's atmosphere. Their jagged, insect-like shapes blocked out the distant stars, casting an ominous shadow over the colony below. The sight of them sent a chill down Elias's spine. The Drakmorians weren't just here to negotiate. They were here to annihilate. Behind him, Harper was working furiously at the control console, trying to align the colony's limited defense systems. The beast stood silently in the center of the room, its glowing eyes following every movement. It had been activated, but Elias could feel it holding back, waiting for something. He didn't know what. "Captain, incoming transmission," Harper said. Her voice was tight with tension. Elias stepped toward the communication panel, his jaw tightening. The screen crackled for a moment before the image of a Drakmorian general appeared. The creature's dark scales gleamed under the cold blue light of its ship's command deck. Its yellow reptilian eyes narrowed as it studied Elias. "I am General Corrin of the Drakmorian Dominion," the creature hissed. Its voice was low and menacing, like the rumble of distant thunder. "You have something that belongs to us." Elias's face hardened. "You're mistaken. We don't have anything that belongs to you." Corrin's thin lips curled back, revealing rows of sharp teeth. "Do not insult me, human. The beast you awakened is Drakmorian property. It was created using Drakmorian technology, and it belongs to us." Elias took a step closer to the screen. "The beast was discovered on human soil. That makes it ours." Corrin's eyes narrowed further. "Do you truly think you can stand against us? Look behind me, human. This is not a negotiation. This is a mercy." Elias felt his fists clench. He forced himself to stay calm. "If you think you can just take it, then come and try." Corrin's mouth twisted into something resembling a smile. "We intend to." The transmission cut off, leaving the room in heavy silence. Harper turned toward Elias, her eyes wide with tension. "What now, sir?" Elias took a slow breath, his mind racing. They couldn't survive a direct assault from the Drakmorian fleet. The colony's defenses were minimal at best. Even with the beast, their chances were slim. But surrender wasn't an option. He turned toward the beast. "Can you fight them?" The beast's glowing eyes brightened. "Yes, but not without risk." Elias stepped toward it. "What kind of risk?" "If I engage the Drakmorian fleet directly, I will burn through my core energy. My systems were not designed to fight an entire armada alone." Elias's mind worked quickly, piecing together their limited options. What if we weaken their lead ship first? Disrupt their command structure? The beast's eyes flickered. "Possible, but you must lure them closer." Elias turned toward Harper. "Can we override the colony's shield array? Make it look like it's failing?" Harper's brow furrowed. "That would make us vulnerable." "They already know where we are," Elias said. "But if they think our shields are down, they might bring their command ship closer. That's when we strike." Harper hesitated for a moment before nodding. "I can set the shields to pulse, like they're failing. It'll take them a few minutes to catch on." Elias turned toward the beast. "Will that give you enough time?" "Yes," the beast replied. "But you must be precise. Once they realize the trap, they will destroy everything." Elias's jaw tightened. "Then we don't give them the chance." Harper's hands moved quickly over the console, activating the override sequence. The shields flickered, casting brief flashes of light across the dark sky. Within seconds, the lead Drakmorian ship began to drift forward, positioning itself closer to the colony's atmosphere. "They're taking the bait," Harper said. "Lead ship is closing in." Elias's pulse quickened as he watched the massive vessel's silhouette loom larger through the viewport. It was close now, too close. "Prepare to engage," Elias said, his voice sharp. "Beast, are you ready?" "Always." The beast's body shuddered as its core began to glow, a deep red light pulsing beneath its metallic skin. Mechanical limbs flexed, and the sound of servos clicking into place echoed through the chamber. Elias stepped back as the beast's towering frame rose to its full height. Energy coursed through its body, and the ground beneath them trembled. Outside, the Drakmorian ship's weapons began to glow. Blue plasma cannons lined the sides of the vessel, charging up as it prepared to fire. "They're locking onto us," Harper shouted. "Beast, fire!" Elias yelled. The beast's arms lifted, and twin beams of crimson energy erupted from its hands, cutting through the darkness of space. The beams struck the Drakmorian ship's shields, shattering them in a blinding explosion. The ship rocked violently, flames erupting along its hull. Corin's face appeared on the screen again, rage twisting his features. "You dare strike the Dominion?" Elias's eyes narrowed. "We're just getting started." Corin hissed, his eyes burning with fury. "Enough of this. Kill them all." Outside, the remaining Drakmorian ships began to move, weapons coming to life as they positioned themselves to attack. Plasma bolts streaked through the sky, slamming into the colony's shields and lighting up the atmosphere with bursts of blue fire. "Shields won't hold for long," Harper shouted. "Beast, focus fire on their weapons arrays." Elias commanded. The beast's body glowed brighter as it leaped into action. It moved with unnatural speed and grace, launching a barrage of energy blasts toward the Drakmorian ships. Several of the smaller ships exploded on impact, debris scattering across the dark sky. But then the lead ship began to descend, its massive cannons glowing with terrifying intensity. "They're targeting the colony," Harper screamed. "Beast, can you stop it?" Elias shouted. The beast's eyes flared. Not without full power. Elias's mind raced. They couldn't risk the colony being destroyed. But if the beast overextended itself, they could lose their only advantage. "Do it," Elias ordered. "We don't have a choice." The beast's core glowed brighter, and its arms extended. A massive pulse of red light erupted from its chest, forming a protective barrier around the colony. The lead ship's cannons fired, but the blasts shattered against the barrier. The beast's body trembled as the energy drain intensified. Its metallic frame began to spark, the lights in its eyes flickering. "Captain," it said, "I cannot hold this for long." Elias's heart pounded. They were running out of time. "We need to take out that lead ship now." Harper's hands flew across the console, targeting their core systems, firing. The colony's defense cannons roared to life, firing concentrated plasma bolts toward the lead ship. The shots tore through its hull, and an explosion erupted across the ship's midsection. The lead ship's engines faltered, and it began to drift downward, smoke and flame trailing from its shattered hull. Corin's face reappeared on the screen, his eyes filled with hatred. "This isn't over." The transmission cut off as the lead ship's remains began to fall toward the planet's surface. Elias turned toward the beast. Its glowing eyes were dim, and its body was shaking from the strain. "You did it," Elias whispered. The beast's eyes flickered faintly. "The battle is not over yet." Elias's eyes hardened. He knew the beast was right. The Drakmorians weren't done yet. The real fight was still to come. Elias stood at the edge of the command platform, his breath ragged as the burning wreckage of the Drakmorian lead ship began to plummet toward the colony's surface. Flames and smoke curled through the dark sky as the shattered hull broke apart in the atmosphere. But Elias knew it wasn't over. The Drakmorian fleet was still there, regrouping, preparing to strike again. His eyes flicked toward the beast, which stood motionless, its glowing eyes dim and flickering from the strain of the last attack. "Status report," Elias barked. Harper's hands moved quickly across the control panel. "Shields at 40%. Defense cannons down to 30% operational capacity. The beast's core energy is critically low." Elias clenched his jaw. They'd managed to cripple the lead ship, but it had cost them. The beast wasn't built to sustain this level of energy output for long. If the Dracmorians mounted another full assault, they wouldn't last more than a few minutes. Through the viewport, Elias watched as the Dracmorian fleet repositioned itself. Several of the smaller ships were already moving into formation, their plasma cannons glowing with renewed energy. A massive warship, larger than the others, drifted to the front of the fleet. Its jagged, obsidian-colored hull bristled with weapons, and a pulsing red light glowed from its core. "They'd brought in a command dreadnought," Harper said, her voice tight with fear. "That thing could wipe out the colony in a single barrage." Elias's fists tightened. "What about the beast?" "The beast's core is drained," Harper replied. "If it tries to engage now, it'll burn out completely." Elias turned toward the beast. "Can you regenerate power?" The beast's eyes flickered. "Slowly. I require time." Elias's mind raced. Time was the one thing they didn't have. The dreadnought was already charging its main cannon, energy building along the length of its hull. He could feel the static charge in the air, the pressure of an impending strike. "We need to buy time," Elias said. "Harper, can we overload the colony's defense grid? Create a feedback pulse to disrupt their targeting systems." Harper's eyes widened. "That could fry our systems completely." Elias's gaze sharpened. "If that dreadnought fires, we're dead anyway." Harper hesitated for only a moment before her fingers flew across the controls. Overloading the grid, redirecting the pulse to the targeting systems. And outside, the colony's defense towers sparked violently as the energy grid surged. A bright wave of electromagnetic energy rippled through the sky, slamming into the Dracmorian fleet. Sparks erupted across their hulls, and several of the smaller ships veered off course, their targeting arrays flickering. "They've lost their lock on us," Harper said. But Elias wasn't looking at the fleet anymore. He was watching the beast. Its glowing core had brightened slightly, the energy pulse feeding back into its systems. Its limbs twitched as the red glow in its chest grew stronger. "Beast," Elias said, "can you engage now?" The beast's eyes flared. "Power at 60%. Enough to engage, insufficient to sustain prolonged combat." Elias's gaze darkened. "We don't need prolonged combat. We just need to take out that dreadnought." The beast's body trembled as its core began to pulse with renewed light. Its metallic limbs flexed, and a low hum of energy built beneath its frame. Elias felt the static in the airshift as the beast's power output increased. "They're recalibrating," Harper shouted. "Dreadnought cannon charging. 30 seconds to firing." Elias's mind sharpened. This was it. "Beast, target the dreadnought's core." The beast's eyes blazed with red light. Its arms lifted, and streams of crimson energy erupted from its palms. The beams cut through the sky, slamming into the dreadnought's hull. The ship's shields flared, struggling to hold against the assault. 15 seconds, Harper shouted. Elias's fists clenched. "Beast, push harder." The beast's core flared brighter as it leaned forward, forcing more energy into the attack. The red beams intensified, and cracks began to form across the dreadnought's shields. 10 seconds. The dreadnought's hull began to glow as its main cannon charged. Elias could feel the pressure in the air, the rising hum of destructive energy about to be unleashed. 5 seconds. The beast's body trembled violently. Sparks erupted from its limbs as its core strained under the output. The red light in its chest pulsed dangerously. "Come on," Elias shouted. The beast's eyes blazed with red fire. Its body jerked forward, and a massive pulse of energy erupted from its chest. The red beam struck the dreadnought's core dead center, and the dreadnought exploded. A massive shockwave ripped through the sky as the dreadnought's core detonated. Fragments of metal and flame scattered through the atmosphere, and the remaining Dracmorian ships were thrown backward by the force of the blast. The sky lit up in a blinding flash of red and white fire. Elias shielded his eyes as the shockwave slammed into the colony's shields. When he opened them again, the sky was filled with burning wreckage. The dreadnought was gone. Harper's voice broke the silence. "They're retreating." Elias's gaze sharpened. The remaining Drakmorian ships were pulling away, disappearing into the dark void of space. They were falling back. We won," Harper whispered. Elias turned toward the beast. Its body was shaking violently. Its core light flickered dangerously, the energy drained from the last attack. Its legs buckled, and it collapsed to one knee. "Beast!" Elias shouted, rushing toward it. The beast's eyes dimmed. Its metallic frame trembled as sparks flickered across its body. Its voice was low and weak. "Core, failing." "Harper," Elias yelled. "Can we stabilize it?" Harper's hands flew over the console. "It's too drained. We'd need a massive energy source to recharge it." Elias's mind raced. What if we reroute the colony's core? Harper's eyes widened. That could shut down life support. If the beast dies, none of that will matter. Elias snapped. Harper hesitated, then nodded, redirecting power. The colony's lights dimmed, and a low hum filled the room. A thin beam of blue light shot from the floor, connecting to the beast's core. The red glow in its chest flared weakly, then brightened as the energy flowed into it. The beast's eyes flickered, then steadied. Its metallic limbs flexed as the energy flow stabilized. Slowly, it rose to its feet. "Power levels restored," the beast said softly. Elias exhaled deeply, his heart still racing. He turned toward the viewport. The sky was littered with the wreckage of the Drakmorian fleet. They had driven them back. "We won," Harper said again, her voice filled with disbelief. Elias's eyes narrowed. "For now." He stepped toward the beast. "They'll come back." The beast's glowing eyes met his. "Then we will be ready." Elias stood on the command platform, his eyes fixed on the dark void beyond the colony's shields. The wreckage of the Drakmorian fleet still drifted through the blackness, broken fragments of their once powerful dreadnought floating lifelessly in space. But Elias knew it wasn't over. The Drakmorians weren't the type to accept defeat quietly. He could feel it, the quiet tension in the air, the unnatural stillness before the storm. Behind him, the beast stood motionless, its metallic frame dark and still. Its core pulsed faintly, the red glow barely visible beneath the metal plating. The last battle had nearly destroyed it. Even after rerouting the colony's power core, the beast had not fully recovered. Elias knew they wouldn't survive another assault if the Drakmorians returned at full strength. Harper's voice broke through the silence. "I'm picking up something on long-range sensors." Elias's gaze sharpened. "What is it?" Harper's hands danced across the control panel. A holographic projection flickered into view, displaying a cluster of red blips moving toward the colony at high speed. Elias's stomach tightened as the display resolved into the shape of a massive war fleet. "They're coming back," Harper whispered. "And they've brought reinforcements." Elias's jaw clenched. "How many ships?" Harper's face paled. "At least 50 capital-class warships, maybe more." A deep rumbling vibration echoed through the colony's structure as the first wave of Drakmorian ships broke through the atmosphere. Plasma bolts screamed through the sky, slamming into the colony's shield with blinding flashes of light. The shield flared, struggling to hold under the barrage. "They're targeting the shield generators," Harper shouted. "We won't last long." Elias's heart pounded. His eyes flicked toward the beast. "Can it fight?" "The beast's power levels are still low," Harper said. "If it fights now, it could burn out permanently." Elias stepped toward the beast. Its red eyes flickered weakly as he approached. "Beast," Elias said quietly, "can you engage?" The beast's head turned toward him. Its voice was low and strained. "Power, insufficient." Elias's hands tightened into fists. His mind raced for options, but there was no way out of this. The Drakmorian fleet was too large, their firepower too overwhelming. The colony's defenses were already failing. If the beast couldn't fight, they were doomed. Outside the viewport, A massive Drakmorian warship descended toward the colony. Its hull was black as night, jagged and angular, with glowing red runes etched across its surface. A deep hum vibrated through the air as its core weapon began to charge. "They're powering up a planet killer," Harper said. Her voice was shaking. "If that weapon fires..." Elias's chest tightened. His mind raced. His gaze moved toward the beast. "We don't have a choice," Elias said. "Beast, we need you." The beast's core pulsed weakly. Power levels critically low. "You've got enough," Elias said fiercely. "You don't need to hold back anymore. If you don't stop them now, we're all dead." The beast's head lifted slightly. Its red eyes flared, brighter than before. Its massive frame trembled as energy rippled across its surface. Sparks danced along its limbs as its internal systems began to surge with renewed power. Engaging. The beast's core flared with crimson light. Its metallic frame straightened as energy pulsed through its limbs. Its eyes brightened, glowing like twin stars. A low hum of power vibrated through the command platform as the beast's systems activated at full capacity. Outside, the Drakmorian planet killer's weapon was nearly charged. A sphere of dark energy floated above its hull, crackling with unstable plasma. The sphere pulsed, growing brighter as the weapon reached full charge. 15 seconds to firing, Harper shouted. The beast's limbs flexed. Its core pulsed violently, and a wave of red energy exploded from its chest. The ground beneath it cracked from the pressure as the beast stepped forward, raising its massive arms toward the sky. A thin beam of crimson light shot from its hands, slamming into the planet killer's hull. The ship's shields flared, struggling to absorb the impact. Sparks erupted along the ship's surface, but the weapon's charge continued to grow. 10 seconds. The beast's core flared brighter. Its body trembled as the red glow intensified. More crimson beams erupted from its hands, slamming into the planet killer with devastating force. The ship's hull began to crack, but the weapon was still building power. 5 seconds. The beast's body jerked as its core output increased to dangerous levels. The red light in its chest burned so brightly that Elias could barely look at it. The beast's arms extended fully. And then a massive shockwave erupted from its core. A pulse of red energy shot across the battlefield, slamming into the planet killer with the force of a dying star. The ship's hull shattered as the pulse tore through its core. The dark energy sphere collapsed inward, and the entire warship exploded in a blinding flash of white fire. The shockwave swept across the battlefield, tearing through the Drakmorian fleet. Smaller ships were ripped apart instantly. Larger warships were thrown backward, their hulls shattered by the force of the blast. Elias shielded his eyes as the light faded. When he looked up, the battlefield was empty. The Drakmorian fleet was gone. Only burning wreckage remained, drifting through the blackness. Harper's voice broke the silence. "They're retreating." Again. Elias turned toward the beast. Its glowing red eyes had dimmed. Its body trembled, sparks flickering across its frame. Its massive arms lowered, and its core pulsed weakly. "Beast," Elias said quietly. The beast's head turned toward him. Its red eyes were faint. "Mission complete." Elias's chest tightened. "Don't shut down on me now." "Core integrity compromised." Elias stepped forward, his hand resting on the beast's metallic frame. "You saved us." The beast's red eyes pulsed faintly. "Power low." Harper's hands flew across the console. "We can reroute more power from the colony's core." "No," Elias said. His hand tightened on the beast's arm. "You did enough." The beast's red eyes pulsed one last time, then faded. Its body stilled, and the red glow in its chest dimmed. The massive frame knelt slowly, its head bowing. Elias's chest tightened. "Beast." Harper's voice was quiet. "It's gone into sleep mode." Elias's gaze sharpened. "Can we wake it up?" Harper's eyes met his. "Maybe, if we have enough time." Elias's gaze moved toward the wreckage of the Drakmorian fleet. "We'll make time." He placed his hand on the beast's shoulder. Its metallic frame was cold beneath his fingers, but Elias knew one thing for certain. The beast would rise again. Elias stood on the cracked platform overlooking the battlefield. Smoke still rose from the burning wreckage of the Drakmorian fleet, the shattered remains of their warships drifting silently in the void beyond the colony's shield. The once glowing Drakmorian flagship now lay in two pieces, its hull split open like the carcass of some monstrous creature. Despite the devastation, the colony stood intact. Against all odds, they had survived. The beast's massive frame knelt in the center of the battlefield, its metallic body dark and unmoving. Its red eyes were dim, the once burning core in its chest, now a faint flicker. Elias's hand rested on the beast's cold shoulder. His breathing was ragged, his body aching from the brutal strain of the last battle, but his heart was steady. They had won. Harper's voice crackled over the comm. "Enemy signals are gone. No signs of Drakmorian ships on any of the long-range scanners." Elias exhaled slowly. His hand slid away from the beast's shoulder as he stepped toward the edge of the platform. Below, human soldiers were tending to the wounded. Medical drones hovered over the battlefield, scanning fallen bodies and administering aid where they could. The ground was littered with the twisted remains of Drakmorian war machines. Despite the destruction, there was a quiet strength in the air, a sense that humanity had survived something impossible. A soldier approached, his uniform torn and stained with blood. "Commander Elias." Elias turned toward him. "Sir, it's over." The soldier's eyes were wide with disbelief. We actually beat them." Elias's mouth twitched into a small smile. "Yeah, we did." A cheer erupted from the battlefield below. Human soldiers lifted their rifles into the air, shouting in triumph. Some fell to their knees, weeping. Others hugged each other tightly, their faces streaked with blood and sweat. Elias watched them, feeling the weight of the victory settle over his chest. Harper's footsteps sounded behind him. She stood at his side, her face pale beneath the dirt and grime. "You know they'll come back," she said quietly. Elias nodded. "Yeah, but not today." Harper's gaze drifted toward the beast's motionless frame. "It saved us." Elias's jaw tightened. He stepped toward the beast, placing his hand on its metallic arm. The cold metal hummed faintly beneath his palm, but the beast's core remained dark. "Can we repair it?" Elias asked. Harper shook her head. "Its systems are critically damaged. It pushed itself too far." Elias's fingers curled against the metal. "We can't lose it." Harper's gaze softened. "We wouldn't have made it this far without the beast, but even the strongest machines have limits." Elias's throat tightened. His hand slid down the beast's arm as he stepped back. The battlefield was quiet now, the smoke beginning to clear. He could see the distant shape of the colony's towers through the haze, their lights flickering weakly. A deep rumble echoed through the sky. Elias's eyes narrowed as he turned toward the horizon. A massive shape was descending from orbit, a human battleship, its hull gleaming in the pale light of the colony's sun. More ships followed behind it, their sleek forms cutting through the atmosphere like daggers. "It's the Terran fleet," Harper said. They answered the distress call. Elias's chest tightened as the first ship touched down. Its landing struts hissed as it settled into the ground. The ship's ramp lowered with a hiss of steam, and rows of human soldiers marched down in tight formation. Their black armor glinted under the sun, their rifles held at attention. A figure stepped forward. A tall man in a black officer's uniform with silver stripes along the sleeves. His eyes were sharp beneath the brim of his cap. He stopped before Elias and offered a crisp salute. "Commander Elias." Elias returned the salute. "Yeah, we received your signal," the officer said. His gaze swept across the battlefield, lingering on the wreckage of the Drakmorian fleet. His eyebrows lifted slightly. "It seems you had things under control." Barely, Elias said. His gaze drifted toward the beast's still form. The officer followed his gaze. That's the beast. Elias nodded. The officer's expression darkened. We've been hearing rumors about this thing. That it's some kind of human superweapon. It's not a weapon, Elias said quietly. It's more than that. The officer's gaze sharpened. We'll have to take it back for analysis. Elias's jaw tightened. No. The officer's eyes narrowed. Commander. The beast stays here, Elias said. His voice was firm. It fought for this colony. It nearly died for us. We're not handing it over. The officer studied him for a long moment. Then his mouth curled into a small smile. Understood, Commander. He stepped back, raising a hand toward his soldiers. Assist with the wounded. Secure the perimeter. The soldiers moved quickly, spreading across the battlefield. Medical teams began treating the injured, while engineering crews started setting up temporary barricades. Elias's gaze returned to the beast. He stepped toward it, resting his hand on its arm. Thank you, he said quietly. A faint vibration pulsed beneath his palm. Elias's eyes widened. Harper's head snapped up. Did you feel that? The beast's red eyes flickered weakly. Its head shifted slightly, the metal plates along its back shuddering as power began to hum through its core. The crimson light in its chest pulsed faintly, like the heartbeat of something waking from a long sleep. It's still alive, Elias whispered. The beast's head lifted slightly. Its red eyes glowed faintly as it turned toward Elias. System. Rebooting. Harper's breath caught. It's repairing itself. Elias's hand tightened on the beast's arm. His chest swelled with quiet relief. Welcome back. The beast's head tilted toward him. Mission. Status. Elias's smile widened. Victory. The beast's core pulsed faintly. Its red eyes brightened. Acknowledge. Elias stepped back as the beast slowly rose to its feet. Its massive frame straightened, and the ground beneath it trembled beneath its weight. The soldiers nearby stared in awe as the beast's red eyes flared, burning brightly once more. Elias turned toward the battlefield. The Drakmorian fleet was gone. The colony stood strong. And the beast, humanity's greatest weapon, and perhaps its greatest ally, stood ready. Harper stepped to Elias's side. What now? Elias's gaze sharpened. We rebuild. The beast's red eyes pulsed steadily. Its massive frame turned toward the horizon, where the Terran fleet hovered above the colony. And if they come back? Harper asked. Elias's smile was sharp. Then we'll be ready. The beast's core flared with crimson light. The battlefield was quiet now, but Elias knew it wouldn't stay that way forever. The Drakmorians would return. The galaxy was still dangerous, but humanity had survived this fight. They had proven their strength, their resilience. And next time, they wouldn't be fighting alone.